All right. It is February 6th, 2019. I hope everybody is doing well on this show on YouTube. This will be our what? Fourth show on here, fifth show. Seems like I just started on show number one. I hope everybody is doing well. It seems like we already had some people waiting in the queue. And there you go, Tracy. Hello, how are you? First one to appear on the comment section. As you can hear, my voice is still a little rough. I think it sounds actually better on the episode this week than it did last week. I'm not coughing as much, but this bronchitis stuff stinks. I got it in Pennsylvania, and it's like 10 days later, and I still have it. But I keep telling myself I'm getting better. LaFord, you've been listening to the classic episodes all day at work. Well, I've never heard the old episodes called as classics, but I'll take it. I love that. That's a great visualization there, LaFord girl. Thank you. And then there's Cherie, business manager. Good to see you. And Dion, Nana, everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight. My, I don't want you to think, oh man, he must be really sick. I feel fine. It's just I got this cough. And but I think I'm getting better. So we got a lot to talk about. I think I say that every week. Didn't get any questions from the audience, so if you do have a particular question that you would like answered, anything, as long as it's PG, I will attempt to answer it for you. But trust me, I got my itinerary off here to the left, your right, and we got a lot to talk about. By the way, I went and saw a personal trainer for the first time in my life today. He kicked my butt a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit for an hour. He was fairly impressed for me being 48, what I could do, but my triceps and a couple other muscles were feeling it a little bit when I was done, but I'm really excited to be involved in this, and I will be seeing him again on Saturday. And this is at a gym that's only a couple miles up the road here on Gulf Boulevard from where I live. Cassandra says she had that cough for 3 weeks. Well, Cassandra, I am more than happy to give this cough back to you. Okay? Jokey, ha, ha, ha. I'm sorry that I stole it from you in the first place. But, yeah, it kind of sucks a little bit. I did not get Mucinex, Jamie. I'm a hard-headed man. I said I think I was going to do that last week. I told you I was going to. I didn't. I apologize. I did not keep my promise. Everybody's giving me sick advice now. Great. Okay. Christina, I can't answer that question about the shoes. That is something that you should ask Katie in the group. I don't know anything about shoes, but we are going to be talking about that case in a bit. Speaking of Juanita Nelson, the poll that I put out every Saturday morning so people can give their opinion on what they think happened. Probably not surprisingly, a majority of people thought that Graham is the person who is Graham Farmer, her boyfriend at the time, maybe they were on the outs, is most responsible for her disappearance. Second choice was Graham and Mr. Nelson, Juanita's father, together, which I also thought was interesting. I thought that was interesting. Probably the most surprising part, not one person picked that Juanita ran away. I think that's a little surprising, at least a little bit, given that she had run away so many times in her life. But the story that Katie told was so convincing to all of you that not one of you picked that. Very interesting. I'm every time I do one of these polls, I'm glad I do it because I seem to get something I don't expect out of every one of them. And that is certainly what popped out to me in this poll, that not one person thought that she ran away on her own. Kat from Texas, we're going to be talking about the latest news from Thomas Brown. Nana says, I did that personal training thing. I went back to swimming. That's funny. Okay, and Carrie says that she agrees most probably that Graham caused Juanita's disappearance. Okay. So there's the poll information. If you have not voted yet, it does not mean that you can't vote. Any poll that has ever been posted in the group is always there. They never get deleted. So if you go back and like some people are saying that they're maybe finding Unfound for the first time, pretty much for all of the somewhat newer episodes, you're going to be able to go into the Unfound podcast discussion group. And if you go back far enough, you're going to find polls for all of those episodes. Please vote. Please. I know it's been maybe months since that poll was posted, but still, if you have an idea, if you have a thought, please vote. Please post a comment. It's very helpful to me. It's very helpful to the family members who I know check those things. So just because an episode was done 6 months ago and the poll maybe hasn't been voted on for a while, please go there anyway, and please take the time to do that. So there you go on the polling. This Sunday, I know some of you are Patreon supporters. Well, this coming Sunday night, as I announced last Friday in the news section of Friday's episode, I'm going to be starting a show somewhat similar to this, the live show that I'm doing here on Patreon. It's going to be for people that keep saying 10, the $12 tier and up. Okay? $12 a month tier and up. It's going to be a little bit different than this show in that it's mainly going to be focused on the episode that just came out. So for this Friday, the disappearance of Desirea Ferris, I'm going to be talking about her case, some additional insights, some opinions. I want to have some conversations with those people who are so generous to Unfound every month and have them have some exclusivity, a very much more intimate setting. I may only have, or maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 viewers for it, but it's going to be Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. where we can have a little bit more on one-on-one kind of atmosphere, almost like more like a dinner table type of conversation. In contrast to this, where at some point, sometimes we have over 200 people watching this live at any one time. And that's more like me standing up on a stage talking to people. I want to get into more a situation where it's a little more intimate. And so I'm going to be doing that there. For anybody who is at that tier on Patreon and can't make the 7 p.m. Eastern time, just like on YouTube and just like it used to be on Facebook Live, the show will be saved and you can watch it later to see what myself and the viewers that were tuning in live had to say. One more reason that you should consider joining Patreon. Of course, joining Patreon at the $12 tier gets you now the blog. It gets you automatically 3 of the ebooks. And then it also gets the video on Sunday evenings, a much more, not quite one-on-one, but very close opportunity to speak with me about a case, voice your questions. I can ask you questions, and we can really get maybe some good discussions going. And then yes, maybe we will get into some other things during that show, but it's 85% of it is going to be focused on the case that just came out. Would love to have all of you there. Once again, if you can find it in your budget to do so. I deeply appreciate it. But that starts this Sunday, February 10th, 7 p.m. Eastern, so 4 p.m. Pacific. So there you go. Mr. Nelson. Only a few people know about this, but all of you are going to find out about it first. Some of my, like Cherie, she already knows about it, business manager. She and I have already talked about my conversation with Mr. Nelson, and I've also talked to Emily, my main person who finds guests for the program. Emily, my assistant, is what I call her. I've had a chance to talk to both of them about my conversation with Mr. Nelson. Yes, Juanita Nelson's father. I got to speak to him on Sunday evening during the Super Bowl. I've never spoken to him before. Never really thought about speaking to him. If you will remember from the interview that I did with Katie, Juanita's sister, she does not have a great relationship with him. And I think that I also passed along after the interview that Marjorie, the oldest Nelson child, she doesn't talk to her father at all. But what happened was Katie, let's just say she arranged it for me to talk to her father. Her father had heard the episode, had some things that he wanted to say to me, and he called and left a message for me, and then I called him back. You should know that the conversation was recorded. As soon as I called him back, I let him know that anything that we were going to talk about had to be recorded, because you get into a situation like that, I don't want it to be some sort of situation where it's he said, he said. I said the conversation went one way, and then he's going to leave the conversation and tell people it went some other way. Okay, so as soon as I called him, I said, "Hi, Mr. Nelson, I'm Ed Denzel from Unfound, and I want you to know that this call is being recorded." So he knew, he acknowledged it. So the call is recorded. However, the only people who've gotten to hear that conversation right now are of course, myself. Cherie has heard it. Emily has heard it. And then I know that I've sent it to Katie, although I don't know if she has listened to it yet. Okay. I have it in my notes what I want to say about this conversation. I would not exactly say that this conversation was cordial. There was no yelling. He might have sworn a couple times, but it was nothing directed at me. Nothing he said to me was personal. He didn't say that he hated the episode. He didn't say that I was a lousy journalist. Nothing like that. Okay, I want to make that clear. Okay, he did not do anything like that. He did do a lot of talking. He did a lot of talking about himself. And I would say, I forget how long the conversation was, but it started somewhere around the end of halftime when I called him and went to about the beginning of the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. Here are the points that I want to bring up that I think all of you would find most interesting, surprising, compelling, and maybe even suspicious. I don't know. And once again, he knew that, the call was recorded. He knew it. And also, I never told him that it was going to be confidential. All right. I never said that to him. Okay. So I feel like I am free to talk about at least parts of the conversation, just to know how he answered particular questions. So he was not baited into this. And in fact, he did most of the talking in this conversation. I probably did 25% of the talking. He did 75%. I think that would be accurate. You should also know that during this conversation, I got to talk to Katie's other sister, Holly, who I think lives with him. Okay, so I got to talk to her. I'm going to say about 7 minutes, a pleasant conversation. Asked her some questions. I think she answered them honestly, but I just want to concentrate on the talk that I had with Mr. Nelson. Probably the most surprising thing is that I asked him, did he know that Graham was beating up his daughter Juanita? That was aired in the episode. That's what Katie said. You can go back. If you haven't listened to the episode, you can go back and listen to it. Mr. Nelson claims that is not what was going on. He claims that the reason that Juanita had the bruises that she did was because Juanita was beating Graham up. He said that. And Sheree, I know you're in here and I know you've listened to the conversation. If you feel like you need to step in here and maybe offer support to some of these things that you heard, and I'm going to say, please do, being that I know have listened to that conversation a couple times. First and foremost, I thought that was a very important question. Did he know that what Graham was doing? He knew that they would get into fights, but Mr. Nelson's idea was that Juanita was beating Graham up. I remind you that Juanita was a 17-year-old girl. Graham, I think he was a 19-year-old guy. I'm not saying that there aren't women out there that can beat men up. I'm not saying that. But I have to say that, and I didn't, of course, never knew Juanita, but it seemed, I'm just telling you what he said. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. That wasn't the answer. Let's put it this way. That was not the answer I expected. I expected maybe, no, he didn't know that, or yeah, I knew it and I told him not to do that and everything. He just said that no, that came from Juanita beating up Graham, things that they would get into. And yes, he would bruise her, but really it was Juanita beating up Graham and he was trying to defend himself. And that's why Juanita had those bruises. Okay. So there you go. I also asked him after Juanita disappeared if he ever suspected that Graham was responsible for Juanita's disappearance. Now, as we know, relationships are the number one motivator reason for disappearances. Ex-husbands, ex-wives, ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-lovers, even family members, brothers, sisters, those kinds of relationships are what drive disappearances. And then maybe second is drugs and maybe business deals, but number one has a lot to do with relationships. I asked him if he ever thought that Graham, did he automatically suspect Graham when Juanita disappeared? He said no, not at all. He eventually says that he came around to suspecting Graham. In fact, Mr. Nelson will tell you that he thinks he knows exactly where Juanita is and that Graham did it. That's what he said. But I found it surprising, given that he's the first. I guess he's the first parent that I've talked to who did not automatically suspect a boyfriend or husband, ex-boyfriend, ex-husband. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. I'm missing it. I could go back through every case and maybe think about it, but it is so rare that when he said it, it kind of caught me by surprise. Once again, though, he did eventually change his mind and about what he thought happened. He says originally that she ran off, and then later he began to think that Graham did something. He never did, though, give me even a time frame at which his opinion started to change. That was important to me because, as you will remember, sometime later after Juanita disappeared, Katie in the interview said that her mother had gone over to the house and actually found Graham hanging out at the house with Mr. Nelson. So what I was going to try to do is try to figure out, was that before or after Mr. Nelson changed his mind? I was never able to determine that because he couldn't remember when that happened. And we do have to remember it was 20 years ago. So I'm not going to give him a too hard of a time on that, but just don't know. It's just a little, once again, an answer that I did not completely expect, just to be honest. I see that the chat room is it frozen up or something? We haven't had any comments here for a little bit. I just want to make sure that the chat room is working. Let me type something here. Yes, it is. Okay. I guess you're all just spellbound or something. Okay. If you'd like to comment on any of this, please do. So there's that. So I asked him about the bruising. He thought Juanita was beating Graham up. I asked him about, did he suspect Graham? He didn't until later. The next thing is that he claims that 2 months before Juanita disappeared, he started driving the kids to school. And in fact, he claims that the day Juanita disappeared, he drove the kids to school. He drove Katie to school. He drove the brother to school, Nick, and he drove Holly to school. That's what he claims on that day. Of course, Katie remembers it as her mother driving them to school. Mr. Nelson remembers it differently. He claims that Juanita was there. They left. When he came back from dropping them off, she was still there, and I'll get into that in a second. Frankly, Katie can't ever remember her father ever driving her to school, ever. Not that day that Juanita disappeared, not 2 months before, not 2 months after. Remember, she was 11 at the time. I would have to talk to, and I talked to Holly, and I asked her that question. Do you remember your father driving you to school that day? She says that she couldn't remember. So I don't know what to make of that. He's claiming that he did it for 2 months straight. So 5 days a week, how many days would that be? 40-some days over the course of 2 months. And Katie says she doesn't remember any of them. So I don't know what to tell you. There's definitely a conflict there. Somebody is misremembering something. So moving on to that day, how he remembers it. He took the kids to school. He came home. Juanita was there. He then claims that Juanita left and went to the neighbors and allegedly made a phone call. How he knows this, I don't know. Did the neighbors come back over? And I don't remember if we ever, once again, something that he came up with. I'd never heard it before. Of course, Katie didn't say anything about this during the interview. I don't know what to make of it. And I'm sure that Katie, if I wanted to get the neighbor's name, I could get that and see if this all checks out. But he claims that Juanita went over to the neighbors to use the phone. And that was that. All right. And that is the reason that the wallet, the food, the money were left behind. And I just don't know what to think of that. Because, if that was the case, wouldn't that be on the public record? I mean, this is the girl's father. Would he not? And we know that there are people out there, including myself, who are suspicious of him. And I think he kind of knew that during the interview. But this going over to the neighbors would certainly make it less likely that he should be a suspect, but it's not out there, even though he's had access to the media for 20 years. It's a little confusing. So I don't know what to make of it. It seems like these facts are suddenly all just popping up after 20 years. That seems like, good pieces of information. Okay, so Cherie is telling me that people are commenting, but I can't see it. Well, that sucks. That really, really stinks, and I don't know why that is. I don't know. So I apologize, everyone. If I'm not responding to your comments, it's because I'm not seeing them. It froze up. The last comment that I see is from Carrie, who says, I agree, just didn't get a chance to answer poll yet. Graham did it. That is the last. Okay. Let's see if. All right. Live chat. Okay. All right. It was me. Wasn't YouTube. It was me. Okay. Now, hello. It works. It's working. It's not frozen. Hello. You are fine. Okay. Listening intently. Okay. Something was not toggled right. I was only getting top comments. I should have had it on live chat. Okay. Let me take a moment to go through some of your comments in case you have any questions. Carrie says, how does she get bruised beating on somebody else? Tiffany, thank you for dropping in. Cherie is backing me up. She's heard the conversation. He did indeed say that Juanita was beating Graham up. Thank you, Cherie, for backing me up on that. Deeply appreciated. Blaze says, glad you have it all taped. Me too. Dion, maybe the dad did do it. Yes. Cherie says, yes, he exactly thought Juanita was shocked, you know. Kay Clark says, Kay Clark, I think you make an excellent point here. Why does this all sound like Alyssa Turney's dad? Full of himself and excuses. Kay Clark, if you even knew, I don't believe I'm ever going to publicize the recording. But those comments kind of make me believe maybe you actually heard it somehow. And a lot of killings have to do with insurance money, which is involved. It works. Okay. Everybody's telling me it's working. Okay. All right. Lots of comments. Sheree, I can see the comments now. Thank you. Amanda's saying it's strange that this grown man was spending time with a 19-year-old guy. Well, they worked together. Oftentimes, Mr. Nelson drove Graham to work. That's what makes this case even a little weirder. But that may have been Graham was actually, I think the way it was Mr. Nelson was actually Graham's supervisor at whatever they were doing. I think Carrie says, I think Katie would remember a change in routine like that. I agree. But Nana thinks the whole thing's fishy. Carrie, did they not have a phone? That's a good question. Because I think it was Christina. I don't think she's in here tonight. I was asking, are there any phone records of them making this call? Well, you have to remember this was 20 years ago. If the call wasn't long distance, then it's probably not going to show up on your bill 20 years ago. So I don't know. I think you make a good point. Why did she go to the neighbors to use the phone? Excellent point. Maybe she's covering something up. Maybe that's why she doesn't talk to her dad anymore. Bree, I don't, if you mean Katie does talk to her father once in a while. It's Marjorie that doesn't at all. I did not feel that Marjorie was covering anything up at all. She had moved out of the house. I got the impression from her that she couldn't get out of the house fast enough. She was nowhere near where Juanita disappeared. So I just don't think that's a possibility. Okay. All right. So now everybody, I can see everybody. I've subscribed to you. Thank you, Terry. Hello, Terry. Oh, gotcha. The father sounds fishy to me. Okay, we're all caught up now. Thank you. My fault. It was my fault. I got to have this little thing over here on live chat. For some reason, it was on top chat, whatever that means. Okay. So, where was I? He claims that he drove the kids to school, and then he claims that Juanita went next door to make a call. Like I said, I would not say that the conversation was cordial. I wouldn't say it was confrontational either. It was somewhere in between there. Okay. He had things that he wanted to say. I had questions that I wanted to ask him. And he eventually did answer the questions, but there was a lot of supposition and rambling before he got around to it. Okay. And Sherry knows exactly what I'm talking, as does Emily, but I don't think she's in here watching tonight. Once again, I know you'd all love I'm sure you'd all love to hear it, but that is something that I would have to talk to Katie about first, and I haven't done that. Okay. But I'm giving you, I think, what the most important points that were gleaned from talking to things that were additions to the interview that I did with Katie. Maybe they fill in a little more of those blanks. And he wanted to talk to me. I mean, he called me. Okay. He called me. I didn't go looking for him. He called me, thanks to Katie. And then I called him back. So he wanted to talk. And as you know, I'll talk to anybody. But when it comes to a situation like that, it's always going to be recorded. I will get the person's permission. And if the person refuses to talk to me because it's going to be recorded, then I don't talk to them, because I'm not going to get into a situation where I say the conversation went one way and then they say something else. I'm not going to do that. All right. So that's why I told him it was recorded. He knew it was recorded. I never told him that it was going to be confidential. So there you go. Yeah, Blaze, I don't think that Graham could be charged with abusing or abuse. That statute of limitations is, I think, long gone. Scout, thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words. Dion says, question. I know Katie said she was PG. Is there a way? I don't know what you mean by that, Dion. Maybe you need to type it out a little bit more. I'm not sure what that means. Katrina says, if I remember right, Dad was in shower according to Graham when she went missing. Has this been confirmed, or where was Dad that morning? The dad says he never saw Graham that morning. Okay, that's clear. He says that Juanita went next door. You know, did he say that she came back? I don't remember. But for sure, he did not see Graham that morning, even though we know this story that Graham allegedly told in jail, which I don't particularly believe it. You're free to think what you want. But at no time did Mr. Nelson ever say that he saw Graham that morning at all. At all. Cherie says she still voted for Graham even after listening to Mr. Nelson. Fair enough. Didn't Katie mention that Juanita called the grandmother? Yes, you would think that would be discoverable and help with timeline. I think that call was made from the Nelson house. But what I think Mr. Nelson is saying is that she went next door to use the phone. For whatever reason. I don't know. Jasmine was we talked about pregnancy. That's something that's covered in the interview, Jasmine. I don't know what to think. Certainly that rumor is out there. Hey, Justino, what's going on? Good to see you tonight. She could call her grandmother. You would think that would be discoverable and help with the timeline. Well, Adrian, it does help with the timeline. But it also doesn't mean that Juanita couldn't have gone next door and made another phone call. It seems a little weird to me, but I guess it's conceivable, even though it sounds a little strange. Carrie, I agree with you. That makes no sense. Why call grandma from home but use neighbor's phone for the next call? Okay. So there you go. I wanted to let you know. Of course, you can replay this to go over this all again. But I got to talk to Mr. Nelson. He called me. It was recorded. He knew it. I never said that it was going to be confidential. Okay. And if he has any problems with me talking about him in this video, then we'll just release the phone call to the public and they can hear it for themselves. Unless that happens, though, I'm going to wait till I talk to Katie about it to see what she thinks. My instinct is probably to just keep it on the down low for now. that attitude may change. Well, Blaze, if he knows where the body is, let's just say that it's on private property and just leave it at that. Katie does not know whether Juanita was pregnant at all. That was something that came up. There's no proof of that. It might make some sense, but there's no proof that Juanita was pregnant. No doctor's report, no home pregnancy test, nothing like that. So I don't know. This is kind of like going back to the Judith Emke case. She claimed she was pregnant. Once again, no proof of that. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. So there you go. Let's move on to the next thing, and that is the Thomas Brown case that is almost a weekly topic now on this show. Phil Klein released a statement. Was it yesterday or the day before? I can't remember because these days go by so fast. It was pretty standard stuff, except for one section. And I'm going to read that section to you. And this kind of goes along with, I guess, the comments that he made right after Thomas Brown's body was found. Some things about Hemphill County and everything that I thought were fairly provocative. Well, he has continued that. I don't, and once again, I've never talked to the guy. I have nothing against him. Penny loves him. That's good enough for me. Okay. I don't know what's in Phil Klein's head. I don't know. I'm just, when he says stuff, I don't know anything more about it than any of you do. Okay. That's the truth. So I'm not going to read the entire statement. I'm just going to read the particular part that I think is the provocative part. The rest of it is fairly boilerplate for a press release. But I will read the provocative part if you've missed it. And then we're going to talk about it at least a little bit because it continues. Even a couple weeks later, it continues to kind of blow my mind. Let me see what people are saying here. Thank you, Pamela. That's a good question, Bree. That's a perfectly reasonable question to bring up in the discussion group. I'd be interested to see what people have to say about that. I'm not going to comment because I'm on the air, but Bree, you are perfectly allowed to bring that question up in the group. Thank you. Okay, this is from Phil Klein on yesterday at 12:36 p.m. I'm guessing that's Eastern time, being it's my Facebook page. This is the first, second, third, fourth paragraph, the fourth paragraph of a roughly 5-paragraph statement. So there's like 3 paragraphs, and then he says this, and pardon me while I look over at the screen to my left. Hemphill County and the city of Canadian will be ever changed by this incident. From leadership in law enforcement to leadership in your county, meaning Hemphill. How you live and your safety factor in your community. We, the investigators on this case from KIC, Klein Investigative, I don't know what the C stands for, want you to know that evil is everywhere. We see it and deal with it every day of the week, both inside and outside government, in the legal community, and in public. We urge you to not give up on the good and politically give up on the good. We urge you to not give up on the good and politically purge the bad. Have faith in the good and get rid of the bad. In the memory of Thomas Brown, embrace what we have just said. Make it your calling, make it your cause, make it your goal. Okay, and like I said, that was the 4th paragraph of a 5-paragraph statement you can find on Help Find Tom Brown. And I think some people have posted it in the Unfound podcast discussion group. First of all, you should know this. Before I comment any further, you should know this. And it was my business manager, Cherie, who is in this group, that told me that, and Cherie, if I get this wrong, please correct me, that Amarillo TV covered that statement, But when they covered it and released it or read it or whatever they did on their program, they left out that paragraph I just read. So they went from the third paragraph to the fifth paragraph, left out the fourth paragraph. Cherie, if you are still watching, please could you verify that for me? Is that how you remember it? Because I didn't see that, but we were talking about it, and she mentioned that to me. And once Cherie mentions that, backs me up on that, we'll talk about it. But once again, I find this statement very, very provocative. It seems to me that you haven't been allowed into the Facebook group yet, LaFord girl. Well, let's try to change that right away. Okay, hold on. Gonna let some people in right now. There's Bree. Bree, okay. Okay, there you go. Bree, I just hit the okay. This statement, I mean, that paragraph is right in line with what Phil Klein said. What was it? The day after or the day the Thomas Brown's remains were identified. And you can go back and listen to that live show, said the same thing, fairly provocative. It sounds to me like no matter what happens in this case, whether Nathan Lewis is involved or isn't involved, whether Pine Gregory is involved or isn't involved, whether the Castleton's involved, yada, 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 all the different rumors that we've heard, since I got involved in this like April of last year, is that Phil Klein seems to believe that Nathan Lewis and others are going to lose their jobs no matter what. That is a fairly provocative statement. I can tell you, and you know that on this show and maybe on the episodes every Friday, I make some provocative statements about cases. I don't think I'd ever say anything like this. And I'm the guy who, saw the video and saw the sheriff's vehicles on and everything. So, but I don't know what Phil Klein knows. I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this is hype. I don't know. Okay. And as you know, I'm not afraid to say something along the lines of, I don't know. Okay. And so Cherie is saying true. That's exactly true about Amarillo TV leaving that out of their coverage. Okay. Thank you, Cherie. You're welcome, LaFord girl. So, I've made the statement, and I'm just going to say it here. What I would say, let's put it this way. If Nathan Lewis is completely uninvolved in Thomas Brown's disappearance, completely uninvolved. He's uninvolved, Pine Gregory. There's not one person in law enforcement in all of Hemphill County who were involved in this disappearance and now what they're calling a murder. I'm going to be honest with you, and maybe I'm just naive. I don't know if there is enough reason for Nathan Lewis to automatically lose his position. Okay, I know all the stories about him. You know what I think about him and everything, but I just don't know if there's enough. I think that people voted. I think people voted him in knowing about these stories about his work before. I think he was a known entity, and I think these people voted for him. I don't think a lot of these things that we found out after the fact are a mystery. This is what they wanted. I guess this is what they deserve. And if he is not a criminal, if he's completely innocent in all of this, I don't think that he should be. I mean, remember, he's an elected official. He's not an employee. He doesn't necessarily, his boss are the people of Hemphill County. He's not like a police commissioner or somebody like that the mayor can say, hey, you're out. You're fired. He's an elected official. There would have to be some sort of recall election, whatever the rules are in Texas and in Hemphill County. Now, the citizens may choose to do that. But it's not like the Texas Rangers can kick him out. It's not like the Attorney General can kick him out unless they bring charges against him for some, dereliction of duty or worse. And in my opinion, I see a lot of bad investigations of missing persons cases, okay? And those cops don't get fired. And I'm not even saying they should. I just wish they'd just get better. So in Nathan Lewis's case, if he's completely innocent and this was just a bungled investigation, should he lose his job for that? And I know, once again, knowing all of the other stuff, I think you still have to leave it up to the voters of Hemphill County. Okay? Now, if he did do some things, maybe he covered up something or worse, then of course there's going to be charges brought against him. And then that's just going to work. It's just going to naturally work itself out. But if he is an innocent party in this, just like I am and all of you are, then it's up to the voters of Hemphill County to decide what they want to do with him. I believe that. I believe that's the democratic process. So with Phil Klein saying all these things, it leads me to believe that he has something else in his mind besides the democratic process of getting Nathan Lewis out of office. Because that's what he said. I mean, to read it again, from leadership in law enforcement. Well, there is only one leader of law enforcement in Hemphill County, and his name is Nathan Lewis. And Phil Klein says that the city of Kane will forever be changed by this incident, from leadership in law enforcement to leadership in your county. So I don't know where these people come from. I don't know where they come from. Just doing a little maintenance here, folks. Okay. So let me see what some of you are saying. I've been going on a little bit of a rant here. Sorry. Katrina says, regardless how Penny highly thought of him as per Klein, she let him go for part 2. Cherie says, backing me up what I said, Amarillo completely left out that paragraph, but plenty of others have commented on. Oh, wow. There you go. A lot of people not even associated with the group believe the sheriff was involved. I added you to the discussion group, I think, Oakley. It is an elected position, and this may just be not let him get reelected. Maybe. Carrie says, as a former sheriff's department employee, I can tell you 2 things. Bad press is not liked, and bad press can and will affect elections. True. Okay. Katrina says, I don't think he should lose his job per se, but on the leave of absence. Okay. Right. Hence the statement made by Klein to purge the bad politically. Got to vote him out unless he's accused and convicted of crime. Yeah. Okay. No, Nana. Perhaps Lewis was the only one running when the election was happening. No, that's not true. In fact, I've had an opportunity to talk to the guy I was running against. He was the former sheriff of Hemphill County, James Pearson. No, there were 2 guys running, and Lewis won by a very, very slim margin. No, he was running against people for sure. Okay, you're welcome, Oakley. So, Nana, he got voted in. I don't think I'm at liberty to say the reason that James Pearson claims that, I've gotten to know James Pearson. I would just want to be full disclosure, and I'm not going to talk to you about some of the conversations he and I have had. But I've gotten to know James Pearson. He is a good guy, okay? He will even tell you this. He's not a politician. Okay. He wanted to always be a cop. That's what he was. The reason he even became sheriff of Hemphill County is not because he got elected. He was the, I don't know, the highest ranking deputy or whatever it was, and the sheriff of Hemphill County died, and he got the position de facto. And so when the next election came up, he felt obligated to run, even though he never ever wanted to run for any office. Didn't, he just want to be a cop, protect and serve, go out, try to help people, put criminals in jail. He never wanted to get into a situation where he had to raise money and go kiss babies and shake people's hands and go out and do those things. He just wanted to be a cop. And so he was probably not the best candidate to be running against Nathan Lewis, but that's the way it went. He felt he had an obligation to the county to run. He did, but he lost. But he was just happy in his former position as a deputy. That's all he wanted to do. But then circumstances made him sheriff, and then he had a responsibility. Then he had to go out and try to get votes, and he almost won. He lost by a very slim margin. And yes, so I want you to all understand who James Pearson is. He's a very humble, very soft-spoken guy. Not the kind of guy maybe that you would ever visualize being the sheriff of a county. And I think that's the kind of the way he thinks of himself as well. A sheriff, once again, in Texas at least, is a police. You have to run for office. That's not what James Pearson ever wanted to do with his career. So you have to keep that in mind when you think about Nathan Lewis running and winning. Jasmine says, I just posted on my Facebook where Penny said she did not know if she was going to continue with Klein investigations. She's going to continue with them. For sure. For sure. Just say I have that of good authority. Okay. Okay. Cherie says this is a bigger issue than just Unfound. It surely is, Cherie. Thank you. So, that is a big statement. This is something now that Phil Klein is a thought, an idea, a theory that he has now been sticking to for 2 or 3 weeks now. He's not backing down from what he said at the time. And all I can say is this: if this case gets solved, whatever happened, and these things don't happen that he is predicting and saying and everything, Phil Klein is going to have some egg on his face. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But he is making some very provocative statements, and he certainly feels like if this was poker, he's putting a lot of his stack in the middle of the poker table. That's the feeling that I get. Why he's saying this stuff, I have no idea. I don't know. All right, once again, never have talked to him. Dion says, here's my question, and I may be wrong, but Lewis had 2 ways to know the kid, right? Both dad and stepdad. Nathan Lewis knew Thomas's biological father, whose name I forget right at this second. In fact, I think that they were in a fantasy football league of all things together. They knew each other. To my knowledge, though, Nathan did not know, at least very well, Thomas's or Penny's new husband, Thomas's stepfather. That's the way I understand it. I could be wrong. But you're right that Nathan Lewis knew, maybe friends with, Thomas's biological father. Remember, Penny and Thomas's dad are not married anymore. So Dion, there you go. Katrina, I don't know if we need to do another interview with Penny yet. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Cherie says Lewis has already been wrong in every aspect of this case, regardless of what you think about law enforcement. That's true. Thank you, Mimi. His father's name is Kelly. Thank you. So Kelly, a guy's name. Yes, Nathan Lewis and Kelly Brown were friends. And once again, they were, I believe, in a fantasy football league together. They might have known each other for other ways as well. Thank you, Oakley. Yes, okay, so backing up. They did play fantasy football together. Okay. I've never played fantasy football in my life. That's just too much work for me. And the stepdad was on the fire department, so maybe he and Nathan Lewis did run into each other, but I don't think those two were as close as Kelly Brown and Nathan Lewis were. That's my recollection. I could be wrong. So there's your Thomas Brown coverage for this week. And once again, to remind you, Amarillo TV left out that paragraph I just read. Why? Well, as I told Cherie when we were talking about this earlier, and I told some other people, I think to be honest, I did talk to Penny earlier today, very shortly. I made the comment that it might have been a little too hot, a little too controversial for Amarillo TV to put that on their program. I think so. I'm just guessing, but I think that's the case, that they wanted to stay away from that. And that's what I mean. It's provocative. Obviously, Amarillo TV thought so. They left that as if that was never said. They went from paragraph 3 to paragraph 5. Very, very interesting. Blaze says, I would never vote for a sheriff. Anyone who treated the missing child's parents as the guy did, told them Tom ran off with an older gay guy. I know that, Blaze, but surely, in my opinion, I've never been to Canadian Texas, although I hope to go there this year, sometime. I don't know if it's going to be the summer, but sometime. It seems to me there were a lot of stories out about Nathan Lewis before he ever ran for sheriff that should have kept him from being sheriff. The voters decided otherwise. I don't know what to tell you. So let's move on to this Friday's case. And by the way, I'm wearing an Unfound shirt tonight. I wore it to do some food shopping earlier today. I certainly did get a couple stares. There were people looking at it. Oh, what's that? It was kind of cool. And I think this is a Jesse Foster shirt. This Friday's case is the disappearance of Desirea Ferris, who disappeared from South Kansas City, Missouri on May 2nd, 2017. The interview for this episode is her stepmother. I think this will be we haven't had too many stepmothers on Unfound. Maybe the first one. But her stepmother, Jennifer Ferris, is the guest. She was married to Desiree's father, and they unfortunately got divorced after Desiree disappeared, so somewhat recently. The title for the episode is called The Drop-Off for a few reasons. One, the claim is that a guy that she was with that night dropped her off at a certain intersection in South Kansas City, and then she disappeared. Seems like the kind of common scenario we hear in cases like this, but in the end, it'll be up for you to judge. Also, though, there was a drop-off where Desiree earlier, or even the day before, was with her older sister, Samantha, who also got dropped off. You'll hear about those details that seem a little, fishy, something that doesn't make a lot of sense, but she got dropped off somewhere that it seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense either. And then to tie this all in, we also know that there's that idiom out there of dropping off the radar. Something that, could mean somebody disappearing. So I thought that the title, The Drop-Off, was very fitting for this episode. And of course, I love to have themes for each episode. And I talk a little bit about that, as I always do, right after the music at the beginning of each episode. So Desiree, she unfortunately got into some bad things, hanging around with some bad guys, as we hear a lot in these types of episodes. And she went out and she was hanging out with two guys into the early morning of May 2nd. A guy named Mark Orzola and another guy, Jason Keegan. She got into a vehicle with Jason Keegan. They went riding around, and then he dropped her off somewhere, and her phone was shut off a little bit after that, and she's never been heard from since. The truck that Jason Keegan was driving was not his. The truck disappeared for about a year until it was found at a chop shop. Luckily, it was still in one piece. This reminds me of like the Nico Lisi episode where the truck was found, but all parted out. And so you're also going to hear about how these two guys, Mark Arzola and Jason Keegan, are now in jail. And in Jason Keegan's case, he could be in jail for a very, very long time, federal drug charges. And so the question out there is, should these guys be given a deal to maybe, talk a little bit more about Desiree and what went on that night? The reason we're talking to Jennifer, the stepmom, is because she has pretty much headed up everything since Desiree disappeared. And she's felt, this was her calling, what she needed to do, even though Desiree was not her biological daughter. And so that's why I'm interviewing her. You should know that I had a chance to, I found out about this case maybe last August, and Jennifer and I could never line up a time to talk. And then she contacted me about a month ago when I was still in Pennsylvania, started talking things out, and then finally got to do the interview. When was it? Was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was yesterday. It was last night. So good interview. She did a great job. But that's what's going to be this Friday, the disappearance of Desirea Ferris, an episode I am calling The Drop-Off. So let's see what some of you are saying. Cherie wants to let everybody know, because she and I were talking about this, if there's any breaking news regarding Thomas Brown, Unfound will be bringing you up-to-the-minute coverage and might even have a live discussion about it. That's true. Cherie and I are going to try to, of course, you should know Cherie has a regular day job. Of course, with Unfound, this is all I do. Going to try to have a plan, should something happen. Should people get charged, no matter if it's Nathan Lewis or John Doe or Jane Doe or whoever. We want to be ready with something that we can go live with when that happens on YouTube. Not on Facebook, but on YouTube, where you are watching right now. So we're going to be working on that. Oakley, I did not see that. No, we're not going to allow that message to be seen. And I'm going to block that because I don't think that that's relevant to the conversation. Oakley, they found her car running in the middle of the road. Not sure what you're talking about there, Oakley. Cherie says she wore my Unfound shirt to work for Casual Friday of Amanda Fravel, Disappearance from Las Vegas. That's great. Shirt got a lot of attention and questions. Love it. Great job, Cherie. And Carrie, where they claim she was dropped off is very unsettling at night, is about an hour or so for me. You're right, Carrie. On Desiree Ferris's case, you're going to hear about that. Very shady part of town. Very shady. Shady. Carrie says she broke down in that part of town. Okay, well, I'm glad you survived, Carrie. So there you go. We've been doing it for a little over an hour now, so I think that's about it. We didn't even get to the news items, just some casual things I saw in the news. I think we had a pretty good show tonight anyway. So we started out with me talking about my voice. I had a real coughing fit here in the middle, but I feel fine now. I realize still that my voice is only about 80%, but it feels better than last week's show. Talked about the Juanita Nelson poll. Talked about how you should be joining Patreon so you can watch the live show that I'm going to be doing there on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Talked about my conversation with Mr. Nelson, some of the questions I asked him and his answers. And then we talked about Thomas Brown, Phil Klein's statement that was released yesterday with that very provocative fourth paragraph. And then we talked about this Friday's case that's coming up, the disappearance of Desirea Ferris from South Kansas City, Missouri on May 2nd, 2017. An episode that I'm calling The Drop Off. The guest will be her stepmother, Jennifer Ferris. So I'm going to go. That's it. I appreciate you all tuning in tonight, except for the trolls that somehow make their way in here. And you will all see me next week unless you go to Patreon and sign up. You'll see me Sunday night. Of course, either way, you're going to hear me on Friday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. If you just got in late, you can start watching from the beginning as soon as I'm done waving. Good night. Favorite time of the week.